Welcome to another session of hashtag LDeduchat, Leadership Development and Education. Today we have the fantastic and inspirational Bob Cox, who will be looking at challenging English and his new vision in achieving that. Welcome to all of you. And again, we've got so many people from so many places. We've got Bess from New York. We've got Freya from Rome today. And I know there are many of you from different parts of the UK as well. So welcome to all of you. And for those people that have been here before, thank you for joining us again. On Twitter today, we've got Nicola Quick. She's also joining us on here as well. So she's doing both at the same time. Follow Chiltern, at Chiltern TSA on Twitter and join in with the discussion there. Share your thoughts. Really important that we get your engagement, and we really value your feedback on all of these sessions, including today's. So without further ado, we're going to jump straight in to Bob Cox's session and we'll play his video. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Bob Cox, presenter, author, teacher, educator, obviously English lover, but lover of all things teaching and learning. In a long career, I admit, over 40 years, I've just had the privilege of working with so many schools. I think about 500 schools I've been in now, and 23 years as a teacher. I'd like to bring to you some of that experience in the short time I've got, and share with you some visions for challenging English. So school leaders, English heads of departments, teachers, literacy leaders, English teachers everywhere of all types. I hope you'll enjoy it, because I think I've got some important things to say about some principles that can feed your vision, and it is your vision, of course, in your school, but I hope some principles can feed that vision, and some strategies to try and show you the way in terms of how, that come from the books, the Opening Doors series, and from the schools with whom I've worked very closely, some of them for a long time now. So enjoy, and let's go on a wonderful literary journey. This is Pinocchio. Look at the eyes in the wood. Wilkie Collins, The Haunted Hotel. Jack London, To build a fire. Build a fire in the frozen wastes of Alaska and you live. Just 3 examples with illustrations by my personal illustrator, Vicky Cox, my daughter, of great stories, great possibilities, great curiosities, and loads of questions to ask, language to explore. Really do think there's an extra scope and potential in literature that can be explored. And if I mention writers like Dickens and Bronte and Paul Laurence Dunbar and Dion Brand and Andre Sneyer Magnuson and Catherine Rundell, and so we go on, Emily Dickinson, some of those you may know, some of those you may not, but the point is this is a journey for all of us. It's a journey for me. Find new texts. We found that to be key. Schools where teachers are finding new texts, falling in love with something that they hadn't thought of using before, is very much, I think, part of a new vision. Think of that word new. And I think the whole literary background builds as we learn the whole time. Our knowledge builds and our pupils' knowledge simultaneously builds. 5 books in the series. The titles give the slightly different angles in all of them, but there'll be 80 units across, and each unit will reflect the kinds of strategies and principles I'm talking about here in terms of working with you actually with a text. That's the style in which I always wanted to write, to give theory possibilities and ideas at the point of delivery for teachers where you've actually got the ideas linked with the text. So theory and practice run concurrently. And here's some great research from Timothy Shanahan. Do read his blogs, just to highlight for a webinar something important. Start kids out with complex texts that they cannot read successfully, then teach them to read those texts well. That really is at the heart of what we're about and what I'm going to try and help you with today. You can just edge your children on, and all of them too. Inclusion is very important. Let's zoom in. Younger ones, reading for meaning and meaning in the reading. When the children were come out of the cab, they were shown into their grandmother's presence. They stood in a little black group before the old lady seated in her bow window, and she asked them each their names and repeated each name in her kind, quavering voice. Wow, stand back from that. That's for younger children. But do you know what? Look at the meaning between the lines. It's rich in teaching possibilities, and it's also setting up a fantastic narrative. That word black, a simple word, but what does it mean there? A black group. Presence. Very interesting spelling too. Lots to explore there in terms of spelling and meaning. And it's also quite formal. We can go a little bit deeper into meaning there for those who are ready. Grandmother's presence sounds very formal, and she's got a quavering voice. Why is she nervous? Lots of questions, lots of fantastic work to be done, I think, on new words, style, and narrative hooks. But the meaning is in the reading. That's going to be a common theme. Old Oak Chest from The Riddle by Walter Delamere. There's the picture. It goes with it. What potential there is. There's 7 silhouettes. And Grandma, who hasn't in fact met them before, is going to tell them not to play in that old oak chest. Opening doors to vocabulary, opening doors to links, connections and themes. It starts young, it starts early. The idea that you actually engage with and learn from words and style with your own brain and mind actively involved, but with a teacher always ready to teach you new things and to teach you how words like that example, those 2 examples, presence and black, have got far more in them than you might at first imagine. So it's a zoom in effect with links, connections and themes. They get older, we move on. Think which famous story this might be. It was the completest and most desirable bedroom ever seen, in the stern of the vessel, with a little window where the rudder used to go through. A little looking glass, just the right height for me, nailed against the wall and framed with oyster shells. A little bed, which there was just room enough to get into, and a nosegay of seaweed in a blue mug on the table. The walls were whitewashed as white as milk, and the patchwork counterpane made my eyes quite ache with its brightness. Well, it's harder text, and we can go stage by stage into it. We could, for example, use colours for repetitions and visualisation. Some of that could come from them, but they're looking at the overall. Later, you can move in and say, underline the verbs. Tell me if there's a figure of speech there. But first, grasp the beauty of that writing. It's fascinating. A little looking glass, oyster shells, nosegay of seaweed. Keep reading the words, keep rolling them round. If we had more time, we could stay longer. You can stay longer with your class, for sure. And it's the zoom in effect again. You're giving a focus, you're deciding what you want to teach, whether it's that effect of the repetitions, whether it is the detail of the description, but it builds together for overall effect. And it's David Copperfield, Peggotty's boat. That's the inside description. It's just fantastic. We could certainly go further. I'm emphasizing all the time, stage by stage, chunk by chunk. That doesn't then flood the memory, and it gives you ample chance to retrieve, to reflect, see how they're getting on. I think, though, move on much more as they get older to emotional responses. They should not be lost. They come up impulsively with younger pupils. Sometimes they get lost with older ones. The most desirable bedroom. Why is it desirable? So it's not too big, but it's also cozy, the right fit. An ache is supposed to hurt. There on the last line, made my eyes quite ache with its brightness. I really like that. I really like the potential of ache for further teaching, because there's so much meaning in that. You might have gathered by now, we need to know the passage, the text, the story, the poem really, really well. Absolutely. And that does not happen overnight. That happens through repeated reading and usage by teachers. We've been back into opening doors schools and found teachers getting more and more confident of using text, which at first sight, they wondered, are our pupils ready for it? But of course, you're building skills right through towards Key Stage 4 with the kinds of stepping stones that I'm talking about. Mark, Note, Explain and Teach is just one of our many thinking engines that I'd recommend to you. If you want to put a bit of structure on it, and you might or you might not, it's just a possibility. The children mark what interests them. They note what is for them perhaps the most important thing about the passage. Then in groups and throughout the class you explain, and then you teach. You move in, because they won't have understood it all. You move in and teach more. The older they get, the longer the extract you can use, the more you can link it in with other texts, but more of that to come. They could do a taster. We love taster drafts. This is one of the opening doors strategies, taster drafts. Walking through a bedroom, creating a detailed scene in just 75 words. Learn from Dickens. Apply your word power and style. Quality text to quality writing. This is writing for reading. It's quite early in the process. We found they were yearning to write. Please, can I write? Older ones too, Key Stage 3, absolutely. And by writing, you're actually learning more about the complexities of what you've just read, even whether it's just a sliver or more. After the taster draft, you can be immersed in more, and you will find a readiness on the part of the pupils to do it. So another opening doors strategy, writing for reading earlier in the process. You might get something like this. We've had these actually just recently. I get fantastic pupils' work sent to me. Thank you very much. Please keep it going. It really does make it all worthwhile. As they stepped through the broken down door, a shiver ran down their spines like trickles of cold water. Only 2 beams of thin light stretched across the rotting walls. A strong scent of stale tobacco mingled with woody smoke and salty sea air overwhelmed the senses. Thank you, Noah. Glancing around, I stepped into the barge. Who knew people could live on boats? The wood burner caught my eye first. Crackling flames were locked inside it. Thick grey smoke filled my lungs as I took in a deep breath. Nearby, there was a small quilted sofa covered in what looked like handmade cushions. Thank you, Liddy. Thank you, Murden Junior School. Quality text to quality writing. You can see loads more of it on the Crown House Pupils worksite. Please look, please use them. Please send me your examples following this session. Nothing would give me more pleasure than to be able to monitor some sort of follow-up to this. I'll just say again, the meaning's in the reading. The reading aloud is critical for all ages. Here's a great master, of course, Dickens himself. Loved public readings, and he's supposed to have exhausted himself giving them. But it's getting across the whole meaning through the intonation and the pauses, the emphasis on certain words or phrases, of course. Absolutely, older ones as well. I can remember teaching year 10 of Mice and Men. Those final few pages, anyone there who's taught it, they'll know what I mean. Oh my gosh, the class goes silent. And the meaning spreads as the class realises what will happen. That's just a very powerful example, but we know reading aloud is very important for younger ones, but please keep it up because it brings the words, the style and the narrative alive. I think it's very important. Just going to move on to some poetry now. Just a few words about that first. I think that really poetry has perhaps the most potential of all to teach more about English. And you think that every comma counts in an even more intense way in a poem. And it's by grasping the overall love and meaning first and then moving in and trying to work out why the punctuation contributes to the meaning rather than just spotting figures of speech and aspects of punctuation in separate exercises. But poetry has huge scope. And I would advise, primaries, if you haven't come to grips with planning for your poetry stage by stage, year by year, please do so. At secondary, they will find it so much more accessible. And I think in Key Stage 3, the challenge still needs to be accessed. It still needs to be accessed. You can't just absolutely just read something out that is really difficult and expect an immediate kind of love. That's why I'm advising stage by stage all the time. Chunk in the knowledge, teach bits, don't flood the memory banks, but what pieces together is real real appreciation and beauty. So let's show you an example of a harder poem, which secondaries certainly use, but actually primaries have used in their own way as well. It's High Flight by John McGee. Sadly died in the Second World War, but sent this home to his parents, thank goodness, before the tragedy of his far too young death. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you've not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting winds along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long delirious burning blue, I've topped the windswept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew, and while with silent, lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. Really, really beautiful. It will take a time to digest, I know, and that is the point. That's one reason I've chosen it. It's going to take you a time to digest. So putting a poem straight away without access in front of pupils where it's challenging can backfire. But when it's taught so well, you can get this from Coastlands. Yes, I have spread my wings, filling the shining sapphire sky as the balmy breeze blows on my feathers, drying droplets from the cool lake below. I swoop and soar up through the candy floss clouds, high in the bright silence. I dive by my nest and chase the whistling wind away, wheeling through the footless paths of air. As I fly above, the shining grass waves at me, and I drift and dart through the warm air. Below me, bright buttercups glisten, snowdrops and bluebells whisper, while the sea shimmers with waves of memories. Thank you very much. That's quality text to quality writing. And why is it that we see schools using text like this for so many different years? It might be year 5, it might be year 9. Well, it depends what you want to use it for. And so a key point I'm making is teach aspects of English, teach through concepts. So you might be teaching about sonnets and you're using High Flight to do it. So rather than doing a text, doing a story, doing a poem, teach the concept, have a deep objective, a long journey, and away goes the learning. You're off on a terrific and exciting journey. And you as the teacher know why you're using the text. Become the master of the text. I know what I want to get out of this. And of course, number one is joy, but that will happen through a journey when it's more challenging. And it starts young. We're just so excited by how young our schools are using literature. Christina Rossetti, hurt no living thing, ladybird nor butterfly, nor moth with dusty wing, nor cricket chirping cheerily, nor grasshopper so light of leap, nor dancing gnat, nor beetle fat, nor harmless worms that creep. Oh, rhythm, word, style, language. Oh, fantastic. There's so much to teach there, we don't know where to begin. And it can get you this. Overton. Crickets so croaky, worms so curly, moths with delicate wings, crickets that spring, gnat with crazy wings, beetle with ebony shell, grasshoppers that sing with their wings. Oh, look at that word sing. Look at the vocabulary from a year 2 pupil, but not just the words, how they're used. It wouldn't happen without Christina Rossetti. It wouldn't happen. Please, if you can, follow the great writers. It's the great writers that inspire us. I'm always saying that everywhere I go, but it's great writers past and present. The past speaks to the present. We learn from the past, we apply, there's a legacy, but then we move on with pioneering and more creativity. That applies to our teaching, but that applies to the writers. So really, I do think there's a huge message about the fact without Christina Rossetti, without John McGee, the level of that poetry wouldn't quite have been reached. But you know what? It wouldn't have been reached without you, the teacher. the part you're playing. You intervene in that textual journey and you make your mark with your knowledge and your skills. And so you make it accessible, you make it possible. It's a fantastic thing to be doing. School leaders, please, I know you're doing great work on curriculum design. You may well be very interested at this point to see this little jigsaw, if you like. Year 2 with Christina Rossetti, the concept can be creating moods in words. You can move on by year 5. The door, Miroslav Holub, is very symbolic, use of symbolism. Maybe year 7, high flight, rhythm and meaning, sonnets. That is such a tiny example for a webinar, but I hope it points the way, because we're working with so many schools who are making terrific progress on a design, on continuity and progression through the curriculum. But why not consider doing it via concepts? The curriculum is the progression model. I would not advise being waylaid into chasing assessment. We've got to teach this because of assessment. Of course, that has happened in the past, but it's happening less. If you move on through concepts, objectives, and texts getting harder and harder, you're building a cumulative curriculum where prior learning actually feeds the next stage. If they've read texts like Walter Delamere's The Riddle when they're younger, they then encounter David Copperfield, more likely to actually be able to not just cope, but enjoy. I've mentioned some of these strategies. These are our opening doors strategies, and they can help, I hope, answer the question, well, how do we do it? Obviously, inclusion is very important, and as much access as you can find. Schools continually develop their own inclusion, their own access. Do you know, one thing that I love about my work is that schools take whatever I say or my team much further. That's the idea. You end up devising your own units, your own questions, your own strategies. We signpost, and you can take it further. You could start with that small little text. In a trice, he came into a garden which has haunted him all his life. Garden, connotation. Think of other stories with garden. What's the meaning for you? What does haunted mean exactly there? Stage 1 is a sliver. Stage 2 could be the picture. What puzzles you? What do you see in the garden? What might be in your garden? Link in those other books about gardens. You might like to think who the author is as I read. Wallace mused before he went on, telling me, you see, he said, there were 2 great panthers there. Yes, spotted panthers, and I was not afraid. There was a long, wide path with marble-edged flower borders on either side, and these 2 huge velvety beasts were playing there with a ball. One looked up and came towards me, a little curious as it seemed. It came right up to me, rubbed its soft round ear very gently against the small hand I held out, and purred. It was, I tell you, an enchanted garden. I know. And the size, oh, it stretched far and wide, this way and that. I believe there were hills far away. Heaven knows where West Kensington had suddenly got to. Zoom in effect, enchanted. Lots of links there with other stories. How can a garden be enchanted? What about what we could call a semantic field? All those words building an impression. Velvety beasts, rubbed its soft round ear, purred. It's a panther, for goodness sake, but it doesn't look like a dangerous one. We can go further. Only we had the time. It's H.G. Wells. Through the Green Door is our title, and it's from The Door in the Wall. Try radial questions. Imagine that a much longer extract was set, which we got in the books. How does H.G. Wells create a distinctive world on the other side of the green door? That is a big, big question. We love them because then each pupil can find their own way through on that long, long journey. Support questions, greater depth questions, which link in other texts. It looks simple. The pupils respond really well to that kind of layout, but you can intervene as needed. Instead of intervening because it's possible that X and Y might find it hard, intervene when they've definitely found it hard, but expect everybody to make as much progress as possible. So it's a model, I think, where You can teach whole class, but still have groupings. But the groupings are according to need. And I hope the radial layouts will help you. And of course, that taster draft can be developed further and is. We get some wonderful, wonderful writing. Do have a look at that Crown House site. Wings to Fly is full, detailed and ambitious writing with as much choice as possible. Learn from H.G. Wells, apply to what you're doing. And read, read, read. Absolute key message. Read, read, read. I'll come back to that in a moment. I call the quality reading expectations link reading. I'm just not so keen on wider reading. It just has that feel of an extra, of something that keen pupils do, or something you might do, or you get round to it in the end. Link in your quality whole text reading with the concept. So the concept of the narrative technique can link with other stories. And that principle you can use with poetry, and Opening Doors schools use right across the country and abroad. And it's been very, very exciting seeing that develop. It's a journey. It's bound to be. Your vision is not going to materialize in a day. Of course, it's a long journey, but it's incredibly exciting because you will see quality reading increasing across the class. Try putting the books on the tables. Get them from the library, which is your precious hub. Bring them to the room, put them on the tables, and have some curriculum time for delving, browsing, reading, then take home. And absolutely through secondary. I was head of English for 13 years at a comprehensive. One of the first things we did was to make sure that right through starting year 7, 8, 9, but even when we could find the time after that, that quality reading was an expectation. It was built in. We gave our expert advice. We encouraged. There was plenty of choice, but it was a great reading culture. So I would very much recommend that. I think that's at the heart of what I'm saying today. Those books are just suggestions, a mixture of classics and fantastic children's literature today. Where the River Runs Gold, Boy in the Tower, two great books with really interesting narrative techniques, and of course Turn of the Screw, with deeper objectives too. Opening Doors Roots, then, there's been a pattern to this. There's an immersion, there's the link making, there's the engagement, questions, 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 there's the feedback and the formative assessment, and then you're teaching. In you go. It's like teaching into the gaps. You find the gaps. I don't think anyone can predict this. The whole point of using challenging text is that it pushes the standards on and the expectations in a very, very enthusiastic way. It enables you to find much more what some of your pupils do or don't know, and then that alters what you want to teach. But you've got that concept of narrative technique, connotations, fantastic scope in that. The concepts go at the top of the planning. Teach the concepts through broad objectives with chunks of knowledge, stage by stage. And the learning sessions start to come together because your knowledge is so deep of the text that you're handling that more possibilities come through. Even taking that Christina Rossetti poem, there was huge, huge scope potential. A summary for you to look at later of the Opening Doors strategies. I've mentioned most of those: link reading, writing for reading, opening doors, the big question, many types of interventions, radials, taster drafts, and the quality text leads to the quality writing. A summary of your key principles that I've gone over. Ask yourselves all sorts of questions back with your staff about quality texts, how you use them, about linking in whole text reading, about inclusion, about progression, pitching high with interventions. That's been at the core of what I've said in this session. Lots to read, lots of influence me. I'm just, there's so much. And in a long career, of course, I'm delving into the past there with Rose. Where did you get that read? Kenneth Koch, up to date with Chris Curtis's book. And what about Ted Hughes, Poetry in the Making? Absolutely essential. And so you've got that to refer to at the end. Mary Myatt's talk is superb on high pitch challenge, lots of echoes. British Library resources are rich. Please look at the Reading School. We work with the Reading School, Carl McCarthy, tremendous website. And we've got free modules. You'll see an H.G. Wells free module on there. There are now, I think, 6 or 7 Opening Doors modules on that site. Please do take a look, and it will complement the books. Lots of contact details. I've mentioned the books. Please do consider the books and how they may help you. There's lots to choose from. Contact me for any questions. That's where you'll find them. And finally, I'm going to finish. This is my reading. This is my past. Opening Doors to Reading. It's about our reading. That's my past. Classics Illustrated. I loved it. And it just got me going into great stories with its visuals. Imagine we had a journey like this. Comic classics are good ones today. Then there's an extract like from our Opening Doors books. Then there's a graphic novel. And then you're ready, aren't you? You're ready for Charles Dickens. And it's a journey. I've tried to emphasize that. It's a journey. It's an exciting journey. I hope this has helped you think about your vision for English. Ultimately, what I've explained has big principles, but also specific strategies that I hope you can actually use. Whatever text you use, Opening Doors can certainly help. I'll finish by remembering the teachers who taught me, because ultimately, do you know what? Nothing can be achieved without you. You're the people who make a difference to the kids' lives. I'm talking about the kind of challenging text that your children might not encounter without you, but with you, their wings can fly. I would put all your planning into the mindset of trying to teach children using text that they probably won't be using themselves. You're the educators. You're the ones with the knowledge and skills who can take it further. And it is, I'm so lucky with what I see in so many schools. I know so many of you are working on this. Keep in touch and keep loving your reading as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I could listen to you forever, Bob. Thank you so much for putting that together for us. Absolutely fascinating. I've learned so much watching that clip, that video over and over again. So thank you from me personally. Just want to remind those people that are watching on Twitter today, you've got Nicola Quick, who's doing the Twitter takeover of @ChilternTSA. Lots of questions and lots of comments being posted on there with screenshots of what you've been watching. So that's been really good to see as well. So do head on over there as well at the same time or afterwards, where you'll find Bob as well, hopefully, if he's got time to actually join in with some of the conversation. Getting to the technical point of Ofsted, one of the key things that came out is that they want to see a passion for reading across all subjects. So it's absolutely vital that we instill that. And I said, as Bob said, without you in the schools, their wings can't fly. I think that's a brilliant quote, which I think I'll be using over and over again. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the wonderful Bob Cox to the E stage. Hi, Bob.
Hello. I'm going to do thumbs. The internet connection is it's okay at the moment.
Yeah, we've got a plan B, as we discussed earlier, but you've seen some of the questions that have come up, and you may have some things that you want to elaborate on anyway that were in your presentation. Where do you want to start, Bob?
I've tried to answer as I could, as they came up. I think for me, and I'm really just playing upon my experience of going into many, many schools and having the pleasure, I think particularly in the last 18 months, has been a huge progress on the curriculum design and the progression. I think it's the shape of English that comes through to me as improving in schools, but probably a lot more is needed. So I would echo all those points I made about the fact that you can pioneer away as one incredible, amazing teacher in your classroom, and that is amazing to see. But actually, those of you who've had the experience of feeling that you're a bit of a lone pioneer will know that it's also not as effective without a school map of learning. So I'm trying to emphasize the whole time, and particularly with transition to secondary, that what I'm suggesting there can make the secondary work so much more accessible, but secondaries have their own issues with access too. But if you can get that design which gives you the steps, the progression, I think that's really important. And then the challenging English nestles within that and actually raises standards constantly, every day.
Absolutely. I mean, I can jump in with just exploring, just from a student perspective. Bess from New York, Bess Morales, she says she really agrees with the suggestion about exposing students to high-level texts they wouldn't do on their own. Would that contradict with having students only read books in their Lexile levels?
I think there's a relationship between reading for pleasure and reading for challenge. And I think it's actually quite important to recognise that reading for challenge is pleasurable. And so the books we choose for ourselves, I deliberately put in Classics Illustrated to show you that, as I remembered it, I didn't somehow start off, I wasn't an advanced reader. I didn't go to any kind of, elitist school or anything. I did grow a love of reading because of my teachers. And I think you can have the reading that you want independently as an absolutely critical part of the curriculum, but teachers do take that further. And I think if not, an opportunity is missed, but that's pleasurable too. There's no greater feeling than suddenly thinking, coming back from school and thinking, I've been told something about Charles Dickens, and I'd always kind of heard his name, but now I know more. And teachers build upon those, the potential that's there. So I often say reading for pleasure and challenge. I don't know if that answered it, but tried.
Yeah, I think it's not one or the other, like you said. It's
not one or the other.
Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
Just broaden that out slightly. And I know some of my colleagues online have asked this. The issue about reading for challenge sometimes applies more to subjects outside English. Yeah. So for those subject teachers out there and those departments out there that are not English, a higher proportion of the reading that they will do will be challenging.
Yes.
Because the students see it out of context. They see it as in, why am I reading in this lesson? And it's not English. How would you overcome that when you've got time constraints to do with content of that subject as well?
I've strangely enough, I've recently done a whole school inset to secondaries and primaries together on opening doors, but to teachers who were not necessarily English teachers. Yeah. And the trust that asked me to do it, were the trust who really thought that, it was, like you said, message that needed to hear more broadly. And really, two quick answers. You've got the academic vocabulary across the curriculum, which subjects do work on in their lessons. But more and more people are taking on the idea of the link reading. It was a big, it's so important in our opening doors journeys. I mentioned those books that you can link in for English. Well, actually, subject-wise, you can start to do similar things. Yeah. You can start in geography and history to have similar read cultures which build through the school, and therefore they complement the very specific teaching of the academic vocabulary that's going on in, say, a science lesson. So I actually think, I keep calling it, as I said, link reading and wider reading, simply because the moment you say wider, people seem to think it's optional. And that's just in the mind, I know, but that's sometimes how it's worked. Link reading does keep on emphasising this is part of the curriculum. You read those enriched books for geography in junior school, primary, secondary. Actually, when the geography teacher then talks about academic vocabulary, they're talking into. Otherwise, it's really hard. So we do come back to quality reading, don't we, time and time again?
Absolutely.
But I've tried to put forward today ways of planning that quality reading rather than leaving it to chance.
Absolutely. So it's more of a facilitator of reading I think if I encapsulate what you're saying is actually we're facilitating good reading and challenging reading.
Definitely. And the key word is expectation. If in the year 7 geography teacher is expecting that level of reading and has aligned the resources and has it as part of the units of work, and it gets progressively harder, it's surprising how many children will actually it and will enjoy it. Because you can tell enjoy goes across everything I say.
Yes.
That's where you get the greatest learning from all of us if they're enjoying it. So it's probably not going to work if it becomes a dry list given out, will then half be forgotten. It is all about that wonderful human being called a teacher who in the classroom bring link reading alive before they take it home to read.
Absolutely. We'll jump to another question. I think it's quite I'm trying to understand where this has come from. So what's your definition? This is from Nora. What's your definition of a good concept?
Thanks, Nora. The concepts have been innovative work in the last year or so. And at first, people were sort of slightly baffled. But do you know what? Concepts have been part of the national curriculum since 2014. They're certainly part of the Ofsted inspection framework. Not specifically going to start saying, where's your concepts? But it's in the wording. It's in the wording. And the reason for it is that it can give you a multi-layered approach. So they can be, abstract concepts in English, use of ambiguity, effective metaphors, a setting and character. We repeat them. You'll be repeating them at A-level. So you begin when they're quite young, and it drives what you're teaching. So if you are teaching about setting, the text you choose can be vehicles for that concept. And what we're finding is it's helping schools to go deeper. So I can quote you the opposite. Lessons that I've been in where somebody is hammering away a noun phrase. A third of the class got that quite early on and are then just doing the same kind of stuff. And it's what I call a bit more of a letterbox curriculum. You can teach things like noun phrases as part of bigger concepts. What you're preserving is the text as the center of what you're doing, the beauty and love and power of language. Instead of, separate vocabulary, separate SPG, separate comprehension, we're starting to get a more coherent vision of English where we can teach what we need to teach always as part of the flow of that text. So, but do email me, any of you, and I can give you examples of concepts. It's something a number of our schools have been working on. And, we've been working with trusts, with local authorities, with schools right across the country. And we've got schools who won't mind being visited and so on, as this kind of challenging English work has just spread and spread. And everyone's challenge is good. It's that has to be said time and time again. That's actually spurring on the teachers, not just because it's that thrill of thinking I couldn't use that text before and now I can. I've got a blog on my website. CPD for Teachers is every day with challenging texts. I would love to come to everybody's school every day, all the minutes, so would all your other experts, but we can't. Main learning happens in the classroom every day. Well, it will be once everybody's back to normal. So you can learn most, I think, from using challenging texts.
Any other questions that have jumped to mind? So I'm going to get you to just read some of the ones in the Q&A, either ones that you've already answered, but you might want to explore.
Yeah, sure.
But just while I just do a quick reminder. So don't forget on Chiltern today, we've got Nicola Quick taking over at Chiltern TSA. Do jump on there, use the hashtag LDeduchat. That's the easiest way that we can find your comments. And I will assume, Bob, that all the links, even though we've been sharing them as well, if you can also share those after the session on Twitter, and we'll make sure.
It helps, yeah.
And we'll also put them on the email contact afterwards so that you've got access to that if you haven't taken any of those down from any other source. Samaya, are you there with us?
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me?
Hi, Samaya. How are you?
Hello, Samaya.
Hi, Bob. Hi, guys. Great session this morning. I just had a quick question. I'm head of Key Stage 3, so we do incorporate a lot of creative writing, particularly because the target at the end of the GCSE for AQA is that they have to write a creative piece of writing based on a stimulus. Our students are pretty good at that, but what they don't do so well is the informative writing. Do you have any advice on how we can try and stimulate that through the creative piece of writing, or is that a separate entity in itself?
You probably won't be surprised to hear me say, I don't think anything is as separate as the system has made it out to be. I do go back rather a long time. My first job as head of English was to persuade people that we could introduce the national curriculum. At that time, read and write are separated, but only for assessment purposes. And since then, there have been a number of artificial separations. I actually think the language and confidence with words that pupils acquire through literature then gets applied in many, many contexts. But actually, you could consider the same kind of link reading setup for non-fiction when they're younger. And some primary schools I know are doing this now, where actually the same principle applies. You'll teach aspect of non-fiction. You've got link reading text to back it up, as well as the core text you actually use in class. The idea of the core text is we've got limited time. Learning sessions only last so long. Zoom in, use a core, but use the core to stimulate more reading. It's the opposite of an extract culture. It's actually using zoom in slivers to actually stimulate a lot more. So I'd suggest you have a think about reading for non-fiction and work that through. Ultimately, I was head of English for 13 years, and it took me 5 years to realise that what was going on when they were a lot younger, before they actually came to us, was having a huge effect on our exam results. That actually, and the other big thing I recommend is transition work, and it's actually becoming a team on a regular basis with local primary, lovers.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's really good advice. In fact, incorporating text. We actually have a system, and I know Nicola Quick is on the call as well, so she'll agree. We have a split curriculum where we do the language and literature, but we also teach the core text through it. I was going to ask Bob, because you've been in the game for quite some time, do you have any examples of these texts that maybe you could share?
Yeah, if you look at the Jaws, obviously is about Visions for Challenging English, my topic. So if you look in the 10 to 13 books, you will find texts that are used an awful lot in secondary schools and will very much do the job. But as you're growing your pupils' confidence, but I always say, as I said on the video, teachers actually take ideas further. Opening Doors is not a model for English. They are principles which our school mould, grow, take further. The idea of a trainer and a presenter is that obviously, if I'm in a sense being a teacher today, then the pupils will absolutely outgrow the teacher. I go into schools. I went in recently, Frogmore Junior, and it was incredible what they'd done. I hadn't been in there for 2 years. It wasn't anything to do with me, but some seeds had been sown, and then amazing head and staff had taken it all on and taken it further. And I get loads of examples like that. So yeah, the 10 to 13 books there'll be challenging text there, and feel free to mould, create, take further. I don't think it's good to put ceilings on teachers' imaginations or possibilities.
Thank you, Samaya. Good questions there, and good points to raise. I know there's quite a few questions there, but we are drawing towards the end of our session now. Before I thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
I think it'd be quite good that we will share any links to any of the resources and any things that you've discussed after this session on Twitter and via email as well. So for those people that are looking for recommendations, looking for Bob's thoughts on what sort of text you can use within your classes, within the different settings especially, I think that would be quite good to share out with all the attendees after the session. So we'll make sure that that happens. So Bob, I think we've tested your bandwidth to its limits.
That's been the biggest challenge of all.
but we've got there. And I think so much again to take away from this. And I think the comments that I'm seeing online, people have been enthusing about what you've been saying. And I just sort of like, just from my personal point of view, I want to thank you because for me, reading is a passion, and I've had that passion since I was 6, 7, 8 years old when I first picked up my book. And I think our biggest challenge as a society is, especially within schools, is I would say the vanishing nature of our libraries and books, and definitely within our communities, books. For me, I still buy books, and people don't understand why I buy books. I love books.
Keep buying.
And I keep buying them, and then I realize that I've got about 10 and 9 of those I haven't even touched yet, but I will do. But I buy them and I read them at my leisure. And for me, and I don't teach English, for me, it opens up my eyes. And if it opens up my eyes, I know that it will do for our students as well. So I'd encourage, one of the key things that you said was that don't forget yourself as a teacher, as an educator. You have got to challenge yourself in terms of your reading as well, so that you can then allow the students to fly with you. So from that point of view, a good reminder, good timely reminder, I think. And at the moment, I think some of us may have a little bit more time to read than we normally do. So thank you, Bob, for your time.
Thank you, Arv. You've been great. Thanks, everybody. I'm so chuffed that so many people joined from across the world. I can't put it into words.
No, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I know that they'll all value and appreciate what you've put together today. So thank you again, Bob.
Thanks, Arv, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bob. So, end of another session. I am learning so much. I don't know about you, but I am learning so much session by session. And I know that it's given me lots to think about and take away as I look at my own practice. So I'm hoping that you've really enjoyed today's session. I just want to remind you, do go onto Twitter. I know I keep banging on about this, but it's a really good way to turn something, that social media, into something that's really positive, that we can collaborate and share our ideas and thoughts online. So at Chiltern TSA, make sure you go on there if you are on Twitter and share your thoughts about today's session and all of our sessions that you attend. Your engagement is really, really valued. The team here, it makes our day when we see the comments come up, having put sessions together for you. So please, please, please do share your comments and your thoughts, and ask questions as well, and give us some ideas about what we can do in the future as well as we move out of this strange and difficult time. Share the link, share it with colleagues that haven't had a chance to watch it. I know that we've all got different commitments, but I want to thank you for your support, and thank you for your ongoing attendance to these sessions. It really makes it worthwhile for us to see all of you out there, and do share this with your colleagues. So this is another session of #LDeduchat, leadership development in education online. See you at the next one. Stay safe.